My name is Rebekah Barnes. I work with Students for Life of America. What is Students for Life of America? We're a national organization that works with high school and college students on university and college campuses throughout the nation. And I just want you to know that there are over 700 pro-life clubs on high school and college campuses. And so I get to travel around, and I'm the Northwest Regional Coordinator, so I get to go through Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Montana, and Alaska. So I have adventures on these campuses. But what I want to talk to you about today is the fact that our generation is actually winning. Because I think it's the best kept secret of the whole pro-life movement that we are statistically more pro-life than we are pro-choice as youth. And so I want to talk to you a little bit today about opposition, because when you start to win, that's when you face opposition. We're winning, but in order to abolish abortion in our lifetime, which is my goal, abolishing abortion in my lifetime, we must be bold in the face of opposition. This is a picture from yesterday's march. I loved it. How many of you were out at the march yesterday? Good, excellent. So I don't know if you noticed, but when I looked around, I saw a lot of young people there. Did anybody else see a lot of young people there? I think that's like proof that we are the pro-life generation. A recently released Students for Life poll found that 45% of Americans aged 18 to 24 are pro-choice, where 44 are pro-life. This used to be so much higher. A few years ago, Gallup poll found this generation of us, we're actually linked to our grandparents' generation as most likely to outlaw abortion in our lifetime. And this May, Gallup found that 51% of Americans identify as pro-life, while 42 are pro-choice. So I want you to see statistics like this, because when I was a student in my high school and my college, nobody told me that it was actually popular to be pro-life. I was told that you are the minority and you're kind of a strange minority if you're pro-life. No, that's really what I thought. And then I started becoming active on my campus, and I started meeting all of these other pro-life students, and I thought, why didn't anybody tell me this? So here's kind of a little graph. I think there's a couple of reasons that we're more pro-life. One is, and it was mentioned here a little bit earlier, but 1/3 of our generation is gone. 1/3. That's personal for me. Those are my friends. Those are my coworkers. Maybe that was my future husband. You never know. But the point is that it's not just something that you can turn around and look the other way. When we think about abortion, it's an issue that has touched your life whether or not you want to acknowledge it. It's not a question of like, should you stand up for life? It's you have to stand up for life. You are the one who has been given a voice to speak for the voiceless. And there's another reason we're more pro-life. We get to see into the womb like no other generation has ever seen into the womb. This is a 10-week-old little person. And when you show these kind of pictures on your campuses, when you show them to your friends, you know what, there's not a lot to argue with. So this is another picture from yesterday. I had to last night I was downloading madly pictures from the internet, because I was like, I want them in the slideshow for today because it's so awesome to see our generation. I believe that our generation, those of us who have never known a moment without abortion, those of us who have been most targeted by the abortion industry, and by the way, those of us who have had the most abortions, we are in the perfect position to end this tragedy because we know the truth about abortion. And we know the truth about abortion. We know not what Planned Parenthood just wants us to know. We know friends. We know siblings, possibly. We know people in our lives that have had abortions. And there's an entire generation of women who is standing up and saying, abortion hurts women. I don't know if any of you saw Time Magazine's cover. I love it when we show up in popular culture. But the title on it was 40 years ago, abortion activists won their epic victory with Roe versus Wade. But the tagline says they've been losing ever since. They've been losing ever since. And inside of this magazine is all sorts of articles. It talks about, the pregnancy center movement, and it talks about the youth movement of America. It actually mentions Students for Life and how all these students are showing up to things like Marches for Lives, and they're doing things on their campuses. This is Nancy Keenan. She's the former, she just stepped down, resigned, president of NARAL Pro-Choice America. And her organization was one of the ones that was primarily responsible for pushing abortion into our culture when they were trying to get it legalized. And their organization is on the forefront of pro-abortion activities. And she stepped down and she resigned. And in her resignation speech in January, she cited the fact that there are no pro-choice young activists. And she's discouraged by that fact. And then she told this story when she was resigning, and she told this story, and she said she got off this bus in January at a March for Life, and she looked around, and she looked at all of these kids getting off the buses, and this is what she said. She thought, my gosh, they're so young, and there are so many of them, and they're so young. And I love that. I love that it is our generation that is actually taking this back. And she said, one more thing in her article, she said, and they're not going away. Yes. So I want to tell you about the good things that are happening on campuses and universities, and I want to talk to you about the opposition so that you stand strong wherever you are. This is one of the students that I work with. I get to travel around and work with different student groups. The girl in the green shirt, Sierra, she's the president, and Jessica's the vice president of their club. Well, they decided 4 days ago on the anniversary of Roe versus Wade at their community college, they were going to go out and put a table up and just show people what life looks like in the womb. And so they put up a little, you can see on the screen kind of over here, they had little baby development models and flyers, and they were just talking to people. That was what they decided. We're just going to educate. And as they were standing there talking to people, a girl walked up, and she stood like, you know, quite a bit of ways from the table, and she looked at it and she said, what are you guys doing? And they said, oh, we're showing people what life looks like in the womb. And she's like, who are you? And they said, well, we're the Students for Life Club at our community college. By the way, this club got started about, I don't know, 6 months ago, so they're new on their campus. And she said, how did you know? And Sarah looked at her and said, what? How did I know what? She said, I woke up yesterday morning and I found out I was pregnant. And Sierra said, how far along are you? And she told them, and they showed her the baby model. That's how far along she was. And she started to cry. She's looking at the little baby, and she starts to cry. And she said, yesterday morning I woke up and I thought my only option is to have an abortion. I can't have an abortion. This is a baby. And so they handed her all sorts of resources, and they told her there were people on her campus, other students that would walk with her through this pregnancy, and they told her, we love you, and we'll support you, and we'll be with you. And she gave them this giant hug, and she said, I didn't know I had any options. I thought abortion was my only option. And I think we've done a very poor job on our college and university campuses of giving women other options. You know, the #1 reason that women have abortions, that they say they have abortions, I didn't have any other choice. We need to be those young people that are standing up on our high school and college campuses and saying, you don't have to choose between your child and your education. You can do both. So, don't be afraid to offer ideas that draw opposition. Remember, if no one is against your idea probably doesn't do anything. I love that quote. So I want to talk to you about opposition. At Students for Life, we get calls all the time from all across the country from students who want to reach out to the campus, create a culture of life, and then they run into opposition from, you know, sometimes from the administration and faculty, sometimes from other college students. It comes from sometimes the community, sometimes the Planned Parenthood in the community wants to shut them down. This is Hilltoppers for Life in Kentucky, and they decided on their campus they were going to have a cemetery of innocence. And so they put up a memorial display with 3,300 little crosses in their auditorium. Well, a few hours later, another student came along, and you can see in the pink side of the picture, there was different colors in the stadium, but the pink side of the picture, another student came along and decorated them with condoms. And she said she was doing an art project for her class. So our Students for Life Club called the security, and they said, somebody's vandalizing our display, and security came out and they said, well, this is protected by the First Amendment, and condoms aren't vandalism. So we called our lawyers. We have lots of lawyers that work with our students for free. It's wonderful. Alliance Defending Freedom helps these students on their campuses, and they called and they said, no, sorry, this is inappropriate. You can't destroy another person's display. So they backed down. We asked them to issue a letter of apology. They wouldn't. But what happened in the process of this is that this story actually went national. And the students and Kristen ended up appearing on Fox News and other news stations telling their story. And so their story went a lot bigger than the small display that they had originally intended on campus. And so what I want you to understand about opposition is it takes you to a whole new level Overcoming opposition is all about attitude. Because you will never succeed at anything great without opposition. A certain amount of opposition is great help to a man. Kites rise against but not with the wind. Who's ever flown a kite? Anybody? I used to when I was a kid. If there's no wind, you don't go anywhere with a kite. I remember as a kid, I would get my kite out and I'd go running across, trying to get that wind resistance so the kite would launch off. It's very much like that. Here's a student. This is Rachel. She's from Vail High School. She decided to start a club last term at her high school. Her very first event was chalking on their campus and hanging up flyers that showed fetal development. She was official with the school. She was approved. She was ready, set, go. Well, when they started chalking, another student got mad. And she went and complained. She said, "They're making me uncomfortable." And so the school tried to shut their club down. They said, "You have to erase it all." The other student went and tore down all their flyers. So I was talking to Rachel on the phone. I said, "Rachel, don't get discouraged." And she's like, "Oh, we're not discouraged." Not only were they not discouraged, but their club went from 20 people to 60 people the next day because other students realized that they were trying to silence her voice. And their janitor came to her and she said, "You know what? When I was in high school, I got pregnant and there was nobody on my campus to support me. And I aborted my baby and I regret that. Thank you for being here." And so their club expanded and grew as a result of the opposition that they faced. And now they're doing great things. I love that group. So the first attitude is courage. In the upper hand corner, you can see students reaching out to other students. In the bottom corner is actually one of my coworkers at the Roe versus Wade rally protest. She was out there standing out there, and she was just standing there with a sign, and pretty soon all the pro-choicers gathered around her, and were kind of closing in. So she just decided to stand and pray, and that's what she did. She just stood there the whole rally standing and praying. But you need to exercise courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than fear. That's a picture of my nephew. He was just born a couple weeks ago. I look at pictures to encourage me. I say, what am I fighting for? Because it's not easy to go on a high school and college campus. My job isn't easy. Go on that campus, stand up for life, get people in your face, get people that don't like what you have to say. I remind myself what I'm fighting for. And I think about, what if somebody had taken away the life of my nephew? What if somebody walked up to my sister-in-law right now and stole her baby and killed him? That's what's happening to women every single day. People are taking their children, and they're not educating them. They're not telling them the truth about the life of their child. They're not telling them the truth about the after effects of abortion. So remind yourself what you're fighting for, and then be courageous. The second thing that you have to have as an attitude when you're fighting opposition is kindness. You've heard the saying, nobody cares how much you know till they know how much you care. If you're not kind in your approach, you won't be a good ambassador for the pro-life position. There are lots of organizations that reach out to women who are post-abortive, and chances are, if you do any kind of reaching out on your campus, remember, 54% of women by age 45 will have had at least one abortion in the US. It's huge. So if you're on your campus, if you're talking about life in your society, in your culture, chances are good you are talking to post-abortive women. So your attitude, the way that you approach them is very important. I love to have literature whenever I'm talking about life on campus that helps somebody. And I look at somebody who's in my face and mad when they come up to you upset or angry, and I ask them, do you have a friend who's had an abortion? Has anybody in your life ever had an abortion? And a lot of times they'll be like, yeah. And the appropriate response in that moment is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Do you think she would want healing? Do you think she would want a support group? Do you think she would want other women in her life who have been through this? Persistence. Persistence, persistence, persistence. If you're going to stand for life, you're going to be persistent. So this was an event that the students at the University of Washington did. They had their flyers torn down repeatedly. You can tell different variations. They started wrapping them around and around with tape. That's how come that one on the little yellow pole survived. So they made a commitment to themselves. They said, okay, we're going to hang up flyers. Every time one gets torn down, we're putting up 2. So every morning they would go out and they would put up double the amount that was on campus the night before. And then pretty soon somebody would come along and start tearing them down and they'd put up more. Well, they had an event. They had Abby Johnson come speak to them. I don't know how many of you know who Abby Johnson is, former Planned Parenthood worker, changed her mind. Well, they had an event with Abby Johnson on campus, and they had a ton of protesters show up. In fact, it was so rowdy and so vicious, the protesting, that she couldn't even finish her question and answer session. But there was a couple things that happened at that event. One, I was watching a live blog of it. And there was a girl who was a pro-choice, on the pro-choice side, and she said, I'm going to be live blogging this event at the University of Washington, and all these crazy pro-lifers will be there. And by the end of her live blog, this was her final post. And they just ended the talk with no Q&A because the pro-choicers are so loud and disruptive. Good job, guys. You know, I was totally expecting to be in a frothy rage at the end of this talk, but I'm just vaguely confused. I'm actually more angry with the pro-choicers than Abby right now. Blur. When you respond with kindness, but you are persistent in presenting your message, in the face of opposition, people will want to hear what you have to say. That's a picture of the event. There was also a baby saved there that night. A girl came up afterwards and said, you know what, I'd like to talk to somebody, I'm pregnant. Never give in. Never give in, never, 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 never. In nothing, great or small, large or petty. Never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense. Never yield to force. I love quotes, so you're getting a lot of them in this presentation, but they encourage me. Fourth attitude is confidence. How many of you were at the March for Life rally? Did you guys go to the rally at the beginning? That's Ruben. He spoke at the beginning, so you might recognize him. But confidence. A lot of time pro-lifers are apologetic in the way that we present our message, partly because we're not confident about it because we've been told for so long that, well, if you're pro-life, you hate women. Or if you're pro-life, you don't care. You're just this moralistic person that's shoving your values down our throat. And confidence is something that slowly kind of leaks out of us. And so when we get in a situation where we're talking to somebody we know is definitely pro-choice, we tend to be sort of apologetic. We start saying, yeah, I'm pro-life, but I still like you. Well, I had an experience with this when I was a student on campus because I ran a pro-life club. And I was a student on my campus, and we were at a club fair, and so we were tabling. And the day before, the pro-choice club on campus, because I was at a public university, and they had a pro-choice club as well, had gotten really feisty, and they'd started throwing condoms at us and stealing our candy and just immature behavior, but we had kind of been tense about it. And so the next day, we had a second day of tabling, and I sat down at the table, and I knew from the girl that I'd taken over the table from, I said, okay, how are things going today? And she told me that, well, they'd already been over there kind of pestering them. And she said, they'll probably come back this afternoon and ask you to put condoms on the table. And I said, okay, okay. So I'm sitting there, and sure enough, I look up and I see the leader of the pro-choice club headed to our table. Well, I'd never actually officially met her, kind of seen her from a distance. And as she's heading to my table, I could tell, I was just getting intimidated and afraid. And I thought, why are you afraid? If you thought she was a pro-life student walking up to you, you would be excited and happy and enthusiastic. And so I decided to approach the situation as if I was trying to recruit her for my club, because that's what you do at club tabling events. And so I thought, okay, she's the leader of the pro-choice club, why not try to recruit her? So she walked over to the table and she said, hi, and I said, hi, do you know what we're doing in Students for Life Club on campus? And she gave me this kind of funny look. I said, we are the best club on campus. We love women, and we want to give them choices and options, and we want to reach out to them, and we want to support them, and we think that women are strong enough to do this thing called education and parent, and we want to help them on our campus. And I just gave her this whole long list of things, and she was just like, whoa. She didn't say anything. She didn't join my club either, though. I was really disappointed. But I realized in that conversation, she looked at me and she said, you know, that's really interesting. And she turned around and she walked away. But I thought, I bet she's never had an interaction with somebody who was telling her that they loved people. So be proud of the stance that you have for life. Because the only reason that you stand up for life, it's not convenient, it's not easy, it's not comfortable. It's because you actually care about people. And that's an awesome thing. You care about people. You care about women. You care about children. Let them know that that's the kind of person that you are. So, know your rights. As a student on your campus, you have rights. You should know them. Alliance Defending Freedom is really good about listing students' rights to them. Know your facts. Nothing will make you more hesitant and apologetic than somebody coming up and asking you questions about your stance on life that you don't have answers for. But there are a lot of amazing pro-life apologetic teachers and leaders. I think you're going to get to hear one this afternoon. I think I saw Scott Klusendorf. He is awesome. Know your facts. And know your friends. One of the reasons that I encourage students to actually form clubs, to actually become active on their campuses, is because it's so much easier to stand up when it's more than just one of you. And remember, I showed you those statistics in the beginning. There are more than just one of you on your campus. I go to campuses all the time, and I'll meet students, they'll be like, I am the only pro-lifer on my campus. And they are convinced that they're right. And then we'll go out there with a clipboard, and after an hour, we'll have a clipboard of 25 people on their campus that are pro-life. And the student will look at me and be like, I had no idea. It's true. The last thing about opposition is for you to anticipate it. There's no better way for you to deal with opposition than you to think out a situation that might occur. So whether it's you being active on your campus and you're like setting up a table and reaching out to somebody, or you know you're going to go to the March for Life and you might run into somebody from the opposition, think out how you would respond, how you would act. We prepare for most situations in our life that might end up being difficult. Prepare for opposition. This is actually at the Oregon State University, and it wasn't my event. It was another group on campus that was showing graphic image displays. But I walked by, and there was the pro-choice group had all of these banners, and they were covering them up. That was their solution to the problem, was not to be honest about what they were actually doing, but to cover it and hide it. And it's a lot of time what you're doing as a pro-lifer is you're kind of pulling back a curtain. Well, anyway, I talked to a kid out there. I said, hey, what do you think about this display? I said, just give me your opinion. And he said, my opinion is abort Jesus. That was his opening line. I was like, oh, that's a little harsh. And the girl who was with me was like, she got all sort of revved up about it. And I said, why? Why would you say that to us? He's like, well, you're religious, and I think it'll offend you. And I said, well, I'm religious, but why do you want to offend me? What is it? And he started talking, and he just talked, and he tried to like attack all the different arguments, and we just continued to talk to him. He told us his girlfriend had been raped at a really young age. She'd had to have an abortion. Talked, kept talking. The last thing he said after 45 minutes of talking, you know, I'm going to have to rethink this issue. So we went from a very hostile, I want to make you mad in your face, to he went away thinking about life, thinking about what were the best options. So anticipate your opposition, but don't be afraid of it. I had a classmate walk up to me. You know, one of the good things about being involved in pro-life work? People start to ask you questions. Instead of you having to insert in the conversation, suddenly you have all these people coming up to you. So, I heard you're doing a pro-life event on your campus. And it's much easier, you know, if somebody asks you a question to answer than to like feel like you have to insert it in every conversation. So she came up to me and she said, are you one of those people that stands outside of abortion clinics and prays? And I had just been out with 40 Days for Life the week before. Our club had gone out there. So it couldn't even be like that was when I was a kid. I said, yeah, I am. She said, well, I want you to know that I'm the kind of person that goes up to people who stand outside of abortion clinics and I yell at them. I thought, oh, great. Here it comes. So again, I asked her, asking people questions, it's such a good way to dialogue. I said, why? Why do you yell at people that stand outside of abortion clinics and pray? And again, a long answer. Most of these people have a story, and they're upset, and they are compassionate, but they have a story, and you need to listen. So I listened, and in the course of her story came out the fact, two things. One is, well, actually three things, a lot of things. But one was that she had taken a friend in to have an abortion, and she was dealing with the guilt and the shame and the pain of that. Secondly, was that she had no idea what fetal development, facts about when heart starts beating or anything like that. And third, she didn't know that abortion was even legal past a couple weeks. They had told her friend to get her friend into the abortion clinic sooner. They had said, if you don't have an abortion like next week, you can't have one at all, which is a lie, but they'd wanted to get her in while she was scared. And so as we talked, she said, oh, I think you're taking away women's rights, and I think you're making people feel guilty for a hard choice they have to make, and it's not really a baby, it's just this clump of cells, and it's like only a couple of weeks that you can have an abortion. So I looked at her and I said, in Oregon, where I'm from, I said, do you know how long it's legal to have an abortion in this state? I said, have you ever heard of partial birth abortion? Have you ever heard of third trimester abortion? And she looked at me and she got this horrified expression on her face, and she said, what are you talking about? And I said, let's go on the internet. Use technology. You guys have technology, you have pictures, you have ultrasounds, you have so much science, so much good stuff on your side. And I said, Google it. So she Googled abortion laws in our state, and she found out that all 9 months, abortion is legal in Oregon. And you know what happened? She looked over at me, and tears started running down her face, and she said, they're killing babies. And that was how our conversation went. Don't be afraid of opposition. Don't be afraid of people that come to you with the hard questions. This is Sophie Scholl. Anybody know who Sophie Scholl is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You will all know after this. You'll be let in on the secret. Sophie, and that's her brother and a friend, was a student, and I think it's Berlin. It's during World War II. She and her brother are part of Hitler's Nazi youth movement. But when they got out and they started into college, they realized what was actually happening in their nation, and they woke up and they said, this is not what we want to support. And so they started a movement called the White Rose, and it was a leaflet passing out distribution, but they were basically one of the only student, I think they might have even been the only student group that stood up. And they started passing around, they started saying, is this what we're standing for? Is this really what we want to stand for? Well, they did get caught eventually. They passed out, I think it was about 7 or 8. They went all through Germany, all through Europe, and they couldn't figure out, the Gestapo could not figure out who was doing this. One day they got caught. She was captured and actually executed, so it's not a happy story in that sense of the word. But she has this quote, and this is something I actually have up on my wall. The real damage is done by those millions who want to survive. The honest men who just want to be left in peace. Those who don't want their little lives disturbed by anything bigger than themselves. Those who have no sides and no causes. Those who won't take measure of their own strengths for fear of antagonizing their own weaknesses. Those who don't like to make waves or enemies. Those for whom freedom, honor, truth, and principles are only in literature. Those who live small, mate small, die small. It's the reductionist approach to life. If you keep it small, you'll keep it under control. If you don't make any noise, the boogeyman won't find you. But it's all an illusion. It's all an illusion because they die too. Those people who roll up their spirits into tiny little balls so as to be safe. Safe from what? Life is always at the edge of death. Narrow streets lead to the same place as wide avenues, and a little candle burns itself out just like a flaming torch does. I choose my own way to burn. And so I say to you, as you're afraid to stand up, if there's something that's holding you back from standing up for life, if it's scary, if it's hard, what are you afraid of? What are you really afraid of? Choose your own way to burn in this culture. There will be a generation that abolishes abortion. And when we look back on it, I want to be on the right side. Thank you. I thought originally when I took this job at Students for Life, I was on a public university as a student, and so I was like, oh, these students on Christian and private campuses, they're going to have it so much easier than I do. That's not really true, because a lot of times you face apathy. You know, people are like, I'm personally pro-life, but I would never be able to tell anybody else that abortion was wrong. So I just want to say to anybody who's on a private campus, you'd be surprised if you stand up for life on your campus, what kind of opposition you'll run into. But secondly, yes, a lot of our student groups form networks. At the University of Oregon and then their sister kind of college, our rivals, Oregon State, they both have clubs, but then the two community colleges and the high school in town also have clubs, and so they're able to do things as a group. And the high school is a private high school, and the community colleges are public, and so you can definitely network with other students around your area and between clubs. That's actually one of the really cool things. I love to see that. All right. Oh, yeah.
Why is it that Planned Parenthood simply pushes abortion? They do know there's also the option for the mothers to have adoptions.
Well, there's this thing called money. And you don't get a lot of money from an adoption. You get a lot of money from an abortion. And Planned Parenthood made over $1.2 billion in profits last year on abortions. So they're not free. They don't just help women out of the goodness of their heart. They're making money. And so that has a very big pull. And it means that that's what is presented when a woman comes into their clinic. Abby Johnson, I really recommend reading her book if you're curious about Planned Parenthood industry. She talks about how they actually had quotas. And if they weren't meeting their quotas, because it's like any business model, you have to like have a certain amount of sales. They had to sell abortions. That's why there's so much advertising for it. So yeah, no, adoption is an option, but it's not in their model. Well, of course, I'm going to say Students for Life is awesome, because we are a national organization. Actually, we're the only national organization that works with students on high school and college campuses. Like, this is our goal. Our goal is training pro-life leaders. Like, we don't want any students to get off that campus without being pro-life leaders. But there are individuals. There's people like Lila Rose. There's people like Kristen Hawkins. There's people. Part of the reason I think that it's a little different than the civil rights movement is now everybody has access to things like social media. Everybody has access to having a voice, and so it makes one voice, I think, a little harder to hear sometimes. But the good thing is you all have a voice. I know most of you, well, I shouldn't make generalizations. I bet a lot of you have Facebook. You can make your Facebook statuses your voice. I do. I've lost friends. Actually, I have the Friend Unfinder app so I can track who unfriends me after I post which pro-life status. But I'm always making new friends, so I never seem to go down that far. But the reality is that you guys all have a voice. And so I think, yes, finding those people that are young, there's so many young pro-life activists. There just aren't the same in the pro-choice movement. But I think it's going to look a little different than the civil rights movement in that I don't see one voice, I see a lot of people working together. Thank you.